can keep it down, but he can hear us with the mic, so.
We're on the air. Look, did we lose Owanda, Jim?
Yes, it appears we did.
Okay, we'll have to hold on a second.
I see only Toronto and me.
Okay. Let's see what happened here. All right, Dave's been locked out. Let me just get him the link again.
Okay.
Or actually, I'll just re-invite him.
There we go.
I'm an idiot. My apologies.
What's the IRC channel again?
It's on irc.perl.org and it's #TPM.
What's the guest password again?
FXP4SSWORD.
FXP4SSORD.
FX password, but A is
4 for the A. It's really lead code.
Sorry about that.
All right. All yours, Jim.
All right, we're good. Do we have you there, Jim?
Yes, I am here.
Sorry, I'll just say then, thanks everyone for coming, and live and direct from New York City is longtime friend of Toronto Perlmongers, Jim Keenan, and take it away, Jim.
Okay. Let's see. First of all, this is the first time I've attempted to present via Google Hangout, so I don't really know what I'm doing. Can you see me speaking right now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Very good. Okay. And you can hear me. I can tell because you're responding to my questions. So we have some audio, we have some video, and so I guess we'll proceed. I had really hoped to be there with you this evening. I'm on vacation this week, and I made it as far as my family's in Rochester, only to realize that the cold that I had been suffering for a week and a half really meant that I should not attempt to add an extra 300 miles onto my trip. So I had to back out of the Toronto portion of my trip and flee back to New York City and the comfort of my overheated apartment. And fortunately, Olaf has the experience with this Google stuff and with hosting people in general that we were able to arrange this. So apologies in advance for any technical difficulties, and if I have a little bit of coughing in the course of the presentation. that's you'll just have to excuse me for that because this is the first time I've attempted to speak at length in about a week and a half. So, one of the reasons that I like to visit Toronto, as I've done so many times, is that there are times when even New York City can get very boring. And oftentimes in the late winter or early spring it gets particularly boring. And I always look forward to that day, that Sunday in, I guess, April of the year, in which there is a special advertising section in the New York Times in which you have a booklet called The Best of Ontario. And that inspires me to try to plan another trip. But it's not just this the annual Best of Ontario section, which is a nice printed stapled booklet that comes with the Sunday Times, but also the Sunday Times travel section occasionally features Toronto. For example, on Sunday, January 31, in their section called Heads Up Toronto, it promotes Toronto as being the place where board games rule. And I thought, wow, Toronto is now competing with Portland, Oregon for the board game play in bars hipster market. So, I just can't wait to get back there. It's just that I've reached a point in life where I now realize that I really ought to be attempting long-distance drives only in the April to October window, not trying in February as I have for the past 2 years. Okay, so enough blather. What we're going to do is I'm going to give a talk that probably should take only 20 minutes called A Taste of Taxonomies, and we'll perhaps have some discussion of that, and then we'll switch to a more informal thing on installing Perls. Okay, so I'm now going to attempt to share my screen.
Cool.
Nice.
And can everybody see the first slide here, A Taste of Taxonomies?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so we're off. Because I can't really see you while I have this. So what I ask is that you post questions either in the IRC channel or in the Google chat, and I'll try to answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. If there's something that really needs clarification, speak up, and I'll interrupt the flow of the talk. But otherwise, I'll just proceed. So let's start with a problem. You are presented with a CSV file that looks like this. You are told that the first column in this CSV file, path, holds hierarchical data about automobile manufacturers, their major car lines or marques, and individual models. You are instructed to process this CSV data and insert it into a relational database table named autos. But you are told that in that table, each row will be uniquely identified by an ID column, and that the hierarchical nature of the data has to be described by a combination of 3 columns, like this. The name column, you are told, is the last part of the pipe delimited string you see in the path column of the incoming CSV file. The parent ID column, you are also told, is the ID number of the row in the database holding a name corresponding to the next to last part of the pipe delimited string you see in the path column. So given this row in the CSV file, once this record is assigned ID 9 in the autos table and name Spark, you ask, what is the ID for Chevrolet in the autos table? And you assign that value, 3, to the parent ID column of the row whose ID is 6. Chevrolet's parent ID in turn becomes 1 because the ID assigned to General Motors, Chevrolet's parent, is 1. The problem is, can you actually get from here to there? Is the database in the CSV file truly hierarchical? And if it is, and you get it into the database table, can you confirm that you preserved its hierarchical nature in the new format? To answer these questions, we have to first learn something about the data structure known as a taxonomy. In today's presentation, I hope to give you an introduction to taxonomies, show you how taxonomies can be represented in plain text CSV files, and present some interesting use cases, including transforming one kind of taxonomy into another. In this presentation, I will define a taxonomy as a tree-like data structure, such as that shown in diagram 1, with a root node, 0 or more branch or child nodes, and 1 or more leaf nodes. The root node and each branch node must have at least one child node, but leaf nodes have no child nodes. The number of branches between a leaf node and the root node is variable. Let's make this structure a bit more human-friendly by giving names to the various nodes. We can leave the root node unnamed for now. You can think of that as Mother Nature, or the divinity, or the unnameable. Looking at diagram 2, you might well ask, do the nodes in the taxonomy have to have unique names? The answer is no, they don't, with one exception. No two nodes which are children of the same parent can have the same name. But it is okay for nodes which are children of different parents to be named the same. So diagram 3 shows a legitimate taxonomy because the two nodes named delta have different parents. However, diagram 4 is not a legitimate taxonomy because two children of the root node are both named delta. A taxonomy.
I brought that down.
A taxonomy may or may not represent some intrinsic hierarchical structure within a data set. What's more important is that a taxonomy be useful in organizing human thinking about a data set. The most famous taxonomies are those associated with Linnaeus and his description of the plant and animal kingdoms. Today, they may not be considered the most scientifically accurate depictions of nature, but they certainly have been useful over the centuries in helping humans think about nature. Here, for example, we have a tree of the animal kingdom as drawn from Charles Darwin's Origin of Species. There are, however, other useful ways to structure our thinking about data sets. The taxonomy is good at showing hierarchical relationships among nodes in a data set, but it's not very good at showing the properties or attributes of individual nodes. For that, we're more likely to turn to a two-dimensional matrix-like structure in which each row represents the properties of an individual node, while each column holds the value of a particular property across all nodes. We see this in spreadsheets, in relational database tables, and should we choose to work in the plain text world, in CSV files. Now let me just back up a minute the slides because I think I may have missed one. Okay. Okay, this is what I want to show. Taxonomies as an aid to human thinkings. Here's one taxonomy of the animal kingdom. There will be a door prize at the end of the meeting for anyone who can identify the language, the human language in which this taxonomy is written. So, to proceed. Can we represent hierarchically structured data in a CSV format? Well, suppose we had a set of demographic data with these four properties: nationality, gender, age, income. With only these four columns, the data is not very useful. We don't have a way to uniquely identify a given record or to look up its properties. But if the data set meets the requirements for a taxonomy, we are on the road to success. And, as we shall see, there are at least two such roads to success. Let's go back to diagram 3. a taxonomy where one node shared the same name with a node with a different parent. Let's assume that each node in this tree has a value for the 4 demographic properties mentioned above. Our first pass at representing this tree in CSV format might look like this. Name, nationality, gender, age, income. We simply create a column called name and populate it with the name of the node in the tree. But this is obviously insufficient. All sense of the hierarchical structure is lost, and 2 nodes share the same name, precluding the name column from being used to uniquely identify each record. But what if instead of a name column, we created a path column, which we populated not just with the node's name, but with the names of each of the node's ancestors? In other words, suppose the path column held the complete route from the root node to any given node. We could do this if we separated each of the ancestor nodes with a delimiter different from that used in the CSV data itself. For example, if we used a pipe delimiter inside the path column, our data would look like this. The path column is now an instance of what is often referred to as a materialized path. So I will refer to this type of CSV data as a taxonomy by materialized path. Note that every node in the hierarchy except the root node, which can often be treated as optional, has its own CSV record. Note further that the materialized path uniquely identifies each record and describes each record's position in the taxonomy. There are, however, other ways to represent a taxonomy in CSV format besides materialized path. Suppose we were to start from the last diagram and issue each record a serial number, a unique numerical ID issued in sequence. Note that we now have 2 columns in the CSV file, ID and path, each of which uniquely identifies each record. Next, suppose that we provide each record with a parent ID value, i.e. the value of the ID field for the record's parent node in the hierarchy. Our taxonomy would then look like this: ID, parent ID, path, and the other 4 demographic fields. Records 1, 7, 10, and 13 have no value for parent ID because their parent is the root node, which we continue to ignore for the time being. Records 2 and 4 have a parent ID value of 1 because epsilon and zeta are the children of alpha, and so forth. But there's one more refinement we need to make. We no longer need all the data in the path column. We can look up each node's parent by checking the value of its parent ID column, look up that node's parent by checking the value of its parent ID column, and so on until we get to the top-level node. We can revert to having a name column which holds only the name of an individual node. Our CSV data now looks like this: ID, parent ID, name, and the 4 demographic fields. We no longer have to worry about records at different levels of the hierarchy sharing the same name because the uniqueness of each record is guaranteed by the ID column, not by the name column or by a path column. And we no longer need the path column to hold a delimited string representation of the route from the node back to the root node. We can follow the chain of IDs and parent IDs to achieve the same end. A fancier way of asking where is this node in the hierarchy is to ask what node is this node adjacent to. The term adjacent list is often used to describe this kind of data structure. But we'll describe this kind of taxonomy where you use IDs and parent IDs to uniquely identify a node and to describe its location in the tree as a taxonomy by adjacent list. Note that the same underlying data structure could be represented by either a taxonomy by materialized path or a taxonomy by adjacent list, and that we have, in effect, transformed the former into the latter. Now, at this point in the presentation, you're probably asking yourself two questions. What's the practical use of this stuff, and where's the Perl? Let's look at some use cases first. I'll construct these cases from the digital marketing industry because that's where I'm currently employed, and hence where I can think of examples most quickly. But I'm sure you'll be able to think of other cases as well. Digital marketing is basically worthless unless it's targeted to particular potential customers. A sub-industry of audience vendors has arisen whose members purport to be able to deliver particular groups of potential customers to advertisers willing to pay a fee for that service. Advertising technology companies need to be able to get data from audience vendors, store it internally, and enable their customers being advertising agencies and advertising brands, to use that data in making decisions about purchasing digital advertising placements. Let's suppose that a particular audience vendor specializes in automobiles and can provide audiences based on manufacturer, brand, and model. Let's suppose further that the vendor supplies its data to ad tech companies in a CSV file said to hold a taxonomy by materialized path. That file might look like this. Let's say that you're a product manager or an engineer in an ad tech company, and an audience vendor has provided you with the CSV data above. Before you go inserting this data into your database and permitting your customers to make purchasing decisions based on the data, you should ask, is this a valid taxonomy? Can I rule out obvious defects in the data? Two potential defects come to mind. First, a missing branch node. Suppose the GM data in the taxonomy above jumps directly from the General Motors node to the General Motors Chevrolet Spark node without the intermediate branch node of General Motors Chevrolet. This would violate the rule that every node in the hierarchy be represented by a unique record in the taxonomy. Hence, the taxonomy would be invalid. Another obvious defect would be two nodes, children of the same parent with the same name. Two children of the parent node are here sharing the same name, General Motors Chevrolet Sonic. This would invalidate the taxonomy because the materialized path would no longer be able to uniquely identify each record. I have written a Perl library called Parse-Taxonomy, which you can find on CPAN, which provides basic functionality for handling taxonomies with data in CSV format. The library contains two principal subclasses, Parse-Taxonomy materialized path and Parse-Taxonomy adjacent list, to handle the two kinds of taxonomies discussed in tonight's presentation. The library also contains a cookbook with recipes for common problems in dealing with taxonomies. Consulting that cookbook, we find that we can validate a taxonomy by materialized path by simply trying to create a Parse-Taxonomy materialized path object. All we have to do is pass the file name to the Parse-Taxonomy materialized path constructor and test for a defined result, and we know whether we have a valid taxonomy or not. Once we have a valid taxonomy, we can play with it by calling methods on the object. For example, we can turn it into a hash. we can also take the data in the object and structure them as a taxonomy by adjacent list, which we then write out to a CSV file. We could next take this CSV file and use it as input for another module within the Parse-Taxonomy distribution, Parse-Taxonomy adjacent list. As was the case with Parse-Taxonomy materialized path, if we can successfully create a Parse-Taxonomy adjacent list object with a given input, we have confirmed that the data has a taxonomically valid structure. We can even turn this taxonomy by adjacent list back into a taxonomy by materialized path by calling a pathify method on this object. And with a little work not shown here, we can write tests that demonstrate that the data structure in the Parse-Taxonomy adjacent list object is exactly the same as the data structure we first created with the Parse-Taxonomy materialized path object. So today we have met the tree-like data structure known as a taxonomy. We've seen how taxonomies can be represented in a two-dimensional row-column matrix format, such as a CSV file. And we've examined how CPAN library Parse-Taxonomy can be used to validate a data structure as a taxonomy and to transform one common form of taxonomy into another. There are a variety of other CPAN libraries which deal with hierarchically structured data, particularly in the DBIX class namespace. I encourage you to check them all out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, let me go out of full screen here and see if I can get to the presentation. Okay, so I guess at this point, if there are questions on the presentation.
Sorry, I had to step out there for a moment, Jim, but did you have nested sets in there at all, or?
A very good question. No, I did not have nested sets in this model. I started out with materialized path taxonomies because that's what we, at my day job, which is MediaNet, that's what we receive as input. And I focused on taxonomy by adjacent list because we take this data and we store it in Postgres in the ID, parent ID format, that is, as a taxonomy by adjacent list. So I created this based on very practical needs. Now, in the course of studying about taxonomies, I did encounter taxonomies by nested lists. And I began to explore the possibility of incorporating that as a third variant in this module, in this library. However, I could not get any of the nested set mechanisms to work at a speed at which humans would consider reasonable. In other words, at least in my implementation, the nested set methods were very slow. So in the CPAN version, there's no capacity for handling taxonomies by nested sets. I believe in the GitHub there is probably a branch or two, but I haven't really followed up on that. So you might want to explain, in case people don't understand, what a taxonomy by nested set would mean.
Okay, so here's the thing. Nested sets, instead of using parent ID, use a left and right marker.
Yes.
And you still have IDs, and every time I looked into nested sets, it confused the crap out of me. I was actually looking at Joe Selko's implementation. He's written he's probably one of the best authorities on SQL that you can read about, but it confused the hell out of me. But it basically is, you number all the nodes kind of in a, I don't know, a traversal order, breadth first traversal order, and you make a note of, who's the previous node and who's the next node on that traversal. So it's for like an adjacency list is very fast on an insert. You only have to know the ID of the parent.
Yes.
But on a pull, on a get, it's hell because it's a recursive get. You have to get this and then the parent and then the parent and then the parent and follow the path upwards. The nested set is handy in that you don't have to do that. There are queries you can do to get the materialized path essentially extremely easily. However, inserts suck because you have to redo every node when you do an insert. You have to reorganize everything. If you remember, doing stuff like rebalancing your A/B trees and stuff. So I admit to not fully understanding it, and I'm sure there's people in this room that could probably rattle it off easily. So it's kind of a trade-off: speed of insert versus speed of select.
Yes. After I had finished most of the work on Parse-Taxonomy, I went through. I sort of skimmed 2 of Joe Selko's books, and I made a mental note that if I ever want to get back into this more deeply, I have to master his content. And that's that's one thing that is definitely true, that the different forms of reading taxonomies have different advantages. And I recall now that you mentioned it, that yes, every time if you have a taxonomy by nested list, every time you have an insert, you have to go through and you have to adjust everything. So that makes it very slow on that. However, if you don't have to change the data very often, and if the important question to you is who are the children of this particular node, the taxonomy by nested set will deliver that answer very quickly, whereas getting the list of children from the other methods is much more time consuming. Over. Other questions?
Yeah, it's Alex Beamish. I had a question. I was wondering how common it is that you would get data already organized like a taxonomy from a database, or does it need to be massaged first?
Again, that's an interesting question, because we face this on the job, and in fact, I faced it at my previous job as well. And what's often the case is that when, let's say that you're an advertising technology company and you are in the process of onboarding a new audience vendor. Well, it's basically the tech people, such as me, tell the product people in the same company that we store our data in Postgres in a taxonomy by adjacent list format, though we may not actually use that technical term. And we can either accept that format, well, but since we are assigning the ID numbers in that case, we're not expecting the vendor to supply those ID numbers. However, what that means is that the vendor must supply data that qualifies as a taxonomy by materialized path, and it's really the product manager's job to work with the audience vendor, so to receive the data in a format that can be very, very quickly validated and uploaded into the database. So this really becomes a human problem that you solve at the onset of your relationship with a particular data vendor. Was that helpful?
We got a bit of an echo of your comment, but I think you've answered my question because it's something you have to set up at the beginning of the relationship.
Yes. I mean, I basically gained insight into taxonomies by looking at what already existed in our system. So, you know, the format had been worked out before I ever came to tackle this particular type of data. And I just, currently we have a system in which a lot of this data is validated by means of Postgres tests that are where we set up a lot of temporary tables and run tests on them. And when we were switching to a new type of data, I theorized that it would be helpful to be able to do a lot of this validation at the Perl level.
Any other questions? Or?
Tom Lagrady, Linnaeus was Swedish, or he worked in Sweden, but that Elu Poo looked Finnish to me. I'm wondering what language it actually is.
Well, you're very, very close. It's actually Estonian.
Ah.
So you know you can express the tree in any human language, but its structure is, at least in principle, consistent across human languages.
They have really good internet service there.
Other questions?
I don't see any traffic on the IRC channel. Is anybody using it?
What's the channel? irc.perl.org /TPM.
Let's see. Yeah, there are people here in the channel. I see Guru, Hi Jasut, Nat P. Maraxes, O Elders, Ricardo, and SFA.
Well, I'm Maraxis.
Okay, so can you put your human name as well so that I can link the alias with the human in case I know the human already? Olaf of Maraxes, okay. Let's see. Who is Guru? Oh, Adam Prime, of course I know him. Alan, of course I know from a long time. Ricardo Girardi, I don't believe we've met. So we meet virtually, right? Okay.
Jim, when's the last time you were here in Toronto?
It was October 2013.
Oh, so recently.
Well, it's a long time for me, but 2 years ago at this time I was in preparation to have knee surgery, and then last year I both this year and last I've attempted to piggyback trips to Toronto on the back of trips to Rochester. Now I normally wouldn't travel to Rochester in the middle of February, but there have been basically situations with my father having to move into assisted living, so I thought, well, you know, I'll go deal with that, and then I'll go on to Toronto. But last year there was this tremendous, you know, the polar vortex, whatever it was, and you know, I just couldn't imagine myself driving in that cold. And this year I have the cold, so I'm not here. So as I said at the beginning, that I certainly hope to get back to Toronto because you know, for me not to pay a visit to Toronto in 3 years is very different for me because I've, you know, come once every year or two now since about 1995. So I'm going to go get a cough drop, and perhaps when we come back, then we can embark on the Perl 6 part of the meeting. Okay? Okay, so you'll have to pardon me if you hear the sound of me eating a cough drop, but I do need that to proceed. This part of the meeting, basically, I have like some introductory remarks, and then basically we turn it over to the people in the room to try to install Perl 6, see how they go. I want to say that I do not claim any expertise in Perl 6 whatsoever. Some people in the room may actually have investigated Perl 6 more than I actually have. But although I've heard of Perl 6 since 2000, and as some of the people know, was very much involved in the Parrot virtual machine project for a number of years, I never really had the mental space to focus on Perl 6 per se. I was too busy learning Perl 5. But so I didn't really pay that much attention to it, even though I wanted it to happen. But this past summer, I went to Europe and I attended the YAPC EU conference, which was held in Granada, Spain, at the beginning of September. And it was at that conference that I fully realized how much of the momentum and excitement in the Perl community at large is shifting in the direction of Perl 6. At the very end of that conference, Larry Wall gave a keynote speech in which he talked about Perl 6 and how he thought that Perl 6 was now ready, for people to seriously consider production code. But what was most interesting to me was the number of very well-known and well-respected Perl 5 hackers who were not involved in the Perl 6 project over the past 15, 16 years, who are now very excited about Perl 6 and who want to program in Perl 6. I'm speaking of people like Curtis Poe, known as Ovid, who in one of his keynote, who is a major Perl consultant and blogger and so forth, as well as a library author. And he gave a talk in which he said, "I wish I could program in Perl 6 all day long." That really surprised me. And then I attended another talk by the Dutch Perl programmer Mergen Brand, known on IRC as Tux. He's someone whose work I've long admired, and in fact, Parse-Taxonomy is in large part based on top of Tux's XS implementation of the text CSV module. And Tux was saying how much he loved programming in Perl 6 because it enabled him to do what it wanted to. Most of Perl 6's development online takes place on the Perl 6 IRC channel, which is actually not on irc.perl.org. It's on irc.freenode.net, and the volume of activity on that IRC channel is really tremendous. And you see many of the people that we know about from the Perl 5 world are going on there and asking questions. People like Dave, his last name escapes me right now, the author of the date time module, and MST, Matt Trout, co-author of one of the Catalyst books and the featured speaker at Perl conferences. So I think that Perl 6 now really deserves a lot of attention from people, if only because people who are very respected in the Perl community but who had previously not been involved in it are getting very interested in it. So to that end, in New York, just this month, we had the first session of a New York City Perl 6 beginners study group. And what we did was we met, as is typical for New York Perl Mongers weekend activity. We met in a bar, and I was very gratified to see that a total of 19 people showed up for our first session, in which we basically got people to Hello World and encouraged them to begin their explorations of Perl 6. So basically, we had quite a few people, almost all of whom were complete beginners, including myself, and that shows to me that there is interest. So. So what I hope to do tonight is simply to get you to Hello World, and then to encourage you to figure out how you want to study Perl 6 yourself. Okay, so let me perhaps I should ask first, of the people who are, who have laptops in the room or whatever, how many of you have already managed to install Perl 6 in some fashion? Can you maybe post in the chat or in the IRC channel if you have already installed Perl 6? Is anybody there? Okay, so I have responses from Guru, Meraxes, and O Elders. Okay, so what I think I'll do is I'll just let me go back to screen share, and now I will just okay. I've gone to the Rakuto.org how to get Rakuto page, and the most, and what I'm looking at today indicates that they've recently upgraded this page, because this particular version I haven't seen before. One of the, by the way, I haven't heard any sound in the past 5 minutes or so. Or is the audio on in the room?
I can hear you fine over here, Jim.
Okay, it just. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's on in there, but I don't know what's going on there. Dave, can you not hear us?
Yeah, it just, you know, during my talk I was hearing stuff from the room, but although I think people can see it, I'm. All right. Well, I will continue to. I'll continue to proceed. The most confusing thing that I've encountered so far with regard to installing Perl 6 is to understand that there are 2 different ways of approaching an installation of Perl 6.
Here's Jim.
Hello?
Oh, you heard us. Yay.
Yes. Okay. And so and it's difficult to keep these apart because they're named very similar. One of them is called Rakuto Star, and the other is called Rakuto Brew. Right? Now, for the purpose of people like ourselves who are just playing around with Perl 6 for the first time, what's recommended is that you use Rakuto Star. Rakuto Star is a package that includes the latest version of the Rakuto Perl 6 compiler, together with a bunch of commonly used libraries. And as you can see from this page, which has only been put in this particular format in recent weeks, that there's a number of different ways of installing Rakuto Star. But if you have Windows 64-bit, you can take this. You can try this .msi file. If you have, if you're on Mac, you can get this dist image file. Or if, like myself, you're on Linux, you can get this tarball file. So if you have not downloaded one of these installation mechanisms, I would encourage you to do that right now. I will mention that if you're more interested in keeping up with the development of the Perl 6 source code, there is a program called Rakudo Brew, which functions much like Brew or Homebrew or Perl Brew, and you can use that instead. I actually, because I didn't know any better, I have both installed in my system at different points. But I recommend that you follow the instructions for installing Rakudo Star for your particular operating system. And it,
Can you hear us now, Jim?
yes, I can.
Yay! So I'm on a Mac, so I'm using Homebrew. Just brew, update, and brew, install Rakudo-star. Is that how you've done it, or do you have a Mac? Or?
Well, I have an old Mac, a Mac that is really too old to install Perl 6. So, and at work I have I believe the operating system is Mac Yosemite, and I have installed Perl 6 there. I don't believe that I use that .dmg file that you saw on let's see, where did we see it? This .dmg file is a new development. I don't think that was available when I installed Rakudo Perl 6 on my Mac at work. So I have not tried that out myself. I basically have used Rakudo Star .tar.gz and built from source.
You're speaking to Canadians. That's GZ, if you please.
Beat 'em up.
Yeah. You can also build Rakudo Brew is pretty easy too. Yeah. Just follow the instructions.
Yeah, the main thing is changing the path to the applications directory.
Mm-hmm.
So Panda is in.
And there's the module installer.
Yeah, so it's in
CPAN.
share Perl 6 site bin. And according to the website,
I
you
think
need
you
to
just-
install line noise as well.
If you source the .rakudo brew file, right, I think that it'll find all those for you automatically.
Panda was installed for me using Homebrew.
Same here. There's more than one way to do it.
Really?
Yeah, I'm using Port, which hasn't supported it yet.
Panda comes with Rakudo Star.
Yeah.
In fact, unless you're working on the compiler, I would suggest that Rakudo Star is the way to do it, because it brings the updated documentation and various other stuff as well for the whole package.
Yeah, at this point, I've I sort of exhausted what I can meaningfully say over a remote presentation. So at this point, I'll just depend upon hearing from you in the room or reading what you're posting in the in either the IRC channel or in the room in the Google Plus chat.
Okay. I'll throw the IRC up on our screen here.
Yeah, so I think I'll stop screen sharing here, and basically, Dave in the room, if you want to take over command of the video, that will be fine.
Okay.
Let me just make that a little bigger. Okay. For those in the room that do not have the sharpest eyes. Okay, so let's get a terminal. Woo! Nice and big. I installed it on my old laptop. Now I'm going to do it on my work laptop. It's funny, I did use Homebrew to install Rakudo Star, I think, 3 years ago, and it did not go well.
Yes, I concur in that. And also, at that time, the Perl 6 it just felt so slow as to be clunky and undesirable. But now the speed is much better, so you don't really feel like you're being held back.
Oh, it's a bottle. They've just got a binary distribution for it. Excellent. That would explain why it was so fast. Interesting. So when you're on Perl 6, you get an interactive.
Once you're ready to Panda install.
Yeah. Panda install. Noise.
Still doing star.
Panda is not very fast.
It is. This does require a compiler, so it's definitely they say.
Sounds like we need
I'm all jealous
sounds like
now
we
and
need Panda
discovered
minus.
my package system does in fact do this. So fortunately, it's not working. Well, it's installed. That's
Panda minus. Dave. That's what we need.
Hmm?
Panda M. For fast version of Panda.
Is it really?
No, but
Oh, okay. Yeah, when do we get the CPAN minus version of Panda?
I cannot answer that question. I do recommend that once you start playing around with Perl 6, that you join the Perl 6 mailing list, or if you prefer, news group, which you can find at the additional place lists.perl.org. And you can pose questions like this. I know that in the last year or so, that the Perl 6 team has in a certain sense had to take on more tasks, because for years and years and years they were almost entirely focused on the development of the specification and on its and on one or more implementations. But when at the FOSDEM conference in Europe 12 months ago, Larry announced that there will be a Christmas release of Perl 6 this year, that meant that people had to start paying more attention to the Perl 6 infrastructure, such as what is going to be the equivalent of CPAN, what is going to be the equivalent of CPAN minus, what is going to be the equivalent of Perl Brew, and so forth. And a lot of those questions, probably most of them, are as yet unresolved. For example, there is as yet no equivalent to CPAN, that is the Comprehensive Perl Archive Network, for Perl 6. And I know that there are people who are working on that, and certainly when I learn enough of Perl 6 myself to contribute, I hope to help on that. But right now, we have something which I think you will find is a very interesting programming language, but in which the total Perl 6 environment is really not built up yet. So there are many ways, there are many things to be done, and hence many ways for people to contribute.
Has everyone had success? Anyone running into problems?
Is there?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Some stuff says you needed to install Rakudo and the more VMs separately, but Rakudo Star seems to say that it includes. Yes, it does.
Being suitably lazy, that's why I chose Rakudo Star.
So I do notice that Panda does not. Okay. If anyone's using Perl Brew, a thing I just realized is that not Perl Brew, Ports, MacPort.
There's one on MacPort?
There is one on MacPort. I just tried it and it installed. So, but Panda is a separate package.
Really?
Which is why it was not working. So,
Huh.
yeah, no, you know. So I guess I can install the version I dumped in my app folder.
As I mentioned, on Mac, I did not try any Mac installer. I did not try Mac ports or Homebrew. I simply downloaded the tarball and and compiled from source, just as I did on Linux. So I can't, I don't have experience in.
Well, the DMG
about ports.
I did download the DMG file and looked at it, and it's kind of strange. It's not an app or anything that normally you would just drag into the applications folder. It's actually like the bin and the lib folders. So you just dump it in, so it doesn't get automatically added to your path or anything. You got to set that up if you install it that way.
Yeah, I actually did that about 15 minutes ago.
Oh yeah.
And the problem is you have to manually set the paths to it.
Yeah, screw that.
Basically, yeah.
Homebrew.
Yeah, I've installed Perl 6 both with Rakudo Brew and with Rakudo Star building from source. But in all cases, I've just put it under my home directory. In other words, I have not tried a system install. And since I have the Perl 6 via Rakudo Brew and the Perl 6 via Rakudo Star in two different places under my home directory, I had to adjust my path accordingly. Let me see if I can bring up. I'll post my path.
I actually thought when you were talking about ports, I'm like, you're on FreeBSD? You know?
No, it's MacPort.
Sadly, there does not appear to be a FreeBSD port yet.
Let me check.
Oh, we have our resident OS nerd.
Thank you.
When you built from the tarball, did you have any trouble with the fake test?
I do not think I did. There now. Let me put it like this. There's sort of a very basic level of tests you can run that are more like a sanity check, and those certainly should pass. Perl 6 itself, the specification, is something that is embodied in the test suite, the full test suite. And the philosophy is that anything that passes that test suite is Perl 6. Rakudo is merely one implementation of Perl 6, though it's the only one that's really functioning there. So I can't recall whether I had attempted to run the full Perl 6 test suite, but the version of Perl that you were getting now, I believe it's the version 6.c of the specification. It is supposed to pass the tests that are associated with Perl 6.c.
I was wondering just because I ran, I think, the full suite of tests, and the first time I attempted it, it sort of hung and I had to interrupt it. The second time passed, but it may just be my environment.
When was that?
When was it? Maybe a week and a half ago?
Interesting. So I just did a panda -- verbose list, and there's actually, that lists the entirety of the modules available. It's actually quite fascinating. More than I thought. Huh.
Huh, I seem to have broken Panda.
Bad panda.
Well, it's now giving me an error that when I Google it was fixed on at the start of the year, so it may not have propagated its way into ports yet.
What on earth is Rakudo P5? Oh no, V5 done. Is there a Perl 5 compatibility layer?
There you go. I'm not sure how well it works, but
My understanding was
Only
we're
Perl
going
5
to-
can parse Perl 5.
the idea was that I think Perl 6 would, because the syntax is extensible, they would eventually just sort of grow it until it's more or less Perl 5, as well as Perl 6. It's,
Yeah, there'll be something like inline, basically, so inline language, and it'll,
Yeah.
that chunk of code
Some kind of-
does act as if it was that language.
sort of macros, I guess.
they've abandoned the thing that they talked about 10 years ago, that the interpreter would do Perl 5 until it saw use v6, and then it would do, so it was going to handle both of them. But it is supposed to, there's supposed to be an inline thing which handles modules.
No,
I'm not sure how complete it is.
yeah. Back in last summer, when they were talking about the Christmas release coming up, that was one of the things that may or may not be ready for Christmas.
Yeah.
It was not a high priority.
What do you mean there's no wrapping paper for my presents?
Exactly. You want some present, not for paper.
Oh, my cat wants the box it comes in.
Ingy even has a module already up there.
Well, he probably had one 10 years ago.
Who does?
Actually, it says 6 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I didn't think like
He's
Oh, okay.
Ingy.net.
he's the Jose Bautista of Perl. It's all about me.
We can thank him for YAML.
Oh, he's responsible for YAML.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, a fellow from here, Adam Prime, and myself, we had driven to Asheville, at the Asheville, North Carolina YAPC, and we ended up giving Ingy a ride to Pittsburgh on our way back. It was quite a fascinating time. He is an intriguing person.
Well, this industry is kind of full of those.
He was one of the people at the hackathon.
Yes, if you ever want a challenge, try pair programming with Ingy.
Oh, God.
He is a big advocate of it, and when in pair programming you use something like Teammate. Man, when you see him starting to take over your terminal, that is interesting.
So it's not so much. No.
Get out of the way while you still have all your fingers.
I have a program working, so mission accomplished, I guess.
Actually, I'm curious now. My latest editor of choice is Adam, and I'm curious if there are any Perl 6 extensions.
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
Like, GUIs are so, like, passe.
Shut up, youngin.
You're supposed to use a magnet to modify the bits on the. Oh, actually, hard drive's kind of out of date, isn't it?
Oh, goodness.
No, what you do is you write a bunch of tools that do your code editing for you. So that's the Unix way, right? Collections of small tools to.
There is an Adam extension, language-Perl 6FE, which is Perl 6 Fun Edition.
There's also an Adam Perl 6 editor tools.
Oh.
Collection of useful Perl 6 editor tools.
That's not very detailed.
No, it's not.
I just posted in the IRC channel how I have my path set up. This basically reflects the fact that the first successful installation of Perl 6 I used Rakudo Brew, right? And I installed it. It installed Perl 6 underneath my home directory $home/.rakudobrew/bin. Then later, particularly as I was setting up this New York City beginners study group, we wanted to standardize, get everybody on the same page, and so we decided to go. I decided to install Rakudo Star as well. So what's first in my path, home/Rakudo Star/bin, that is the Perl 6 installed by means of Rakudo Star, which, since I'm on Linux, meant building that from source. But this does indicate that you can have both versions of Perl 6 on your system, and you just have to separate them with your path and and be consistent in what you're doing from that point forward.
Inter.
Winter, web support, context 16. Oh,
Hot damn, that's big.
which one?
That's got a lot of stuff in it. Who made this?
Not. So
And he has He has Camellia as the Perl 6 icon for the files.
Oh, yeah.
I admit I still have issues with Camellia.
The butterfly? But she's cute.
If you're 2 years old.
Yeah. So, I'm immature.
Larry explicitly said that he wanted the icon to appeal to 7-year-old girl.
I told my wife about that. She said that's condescending.
Ah.
For what it's worth. She's older than 7, though, so.
God, I hope so.
Me too.
Call him Muslim.
Unexpected.
It occurred to me that came out perhaps a bit wrong. Yes. Well. No.
Actually, if any of you have been watching blogs.perl.org, Zafik Znet, or Zednet, who's presenting next month on, he's going to start digging into Perl 6 with us. He's written a whole series of blog posts about his explorations of Perl 6, which are really, really good. Fascinating little comparisons, what are the differences, some little features that he really loves. So he really dove in head first. So
I would really love for there to be a Perl doc for Perl 6. There is no Perl doc.
there isn't?
I don't think so.
But there seems to be a module.
Is there? Maybe I just don't have it then. Or maybe it's just one of those parts of, it's another package, and maybe it's just another package included with
It's so-called Perl
ports.
doc.
P6 doc.
Yep.
P6 doc.
Okay, I don't have it installed. All right then. That's
Nice to do a Frax post it.
Yeah, the equivalent of Perl 6, the equivalent of Perl doc is one of the to-do items. Can I ask if everyone who's in the session has at least managed to install Perl 6 in some fashion by this point?
Yes.
Looks like it.
Yep, I've successfully written and run a Hello World program.
Very good. Mission accomplished.
Are you going to explain the REPL cycle, Jim?
I have not really tried that out myself yet. Try it.
Just invoke Perl 6 without any arguments.
Well, yes, it does work.
So now you can type in an expression and it will give you the answer back.
Yes, now I know, for example, that if you go to the Perl 6 channel on Freenode, that they have bots that basically do the equivalent of the REPL, so that you can try code out in the IRC channel. Let me just copy and paste the most recent post, which is from 14 minutes ago. Now, I don't claim to understand that, but if you hang out in Perl 6, you you are going to see a lot of that stuff.
Is TAP still the standard for Perl 6 testing?
I believe so.
I believe it is, but I'm not expert on that.
It's actually interesting. I've been reading about a JS guy by the name of Eric Elliott, and he's a big proponent of React.js. And what he actually recommends for JavaScript testing is a library called Tape, which outputs TAP. He says it's an elegant and beautiful format, and he pushes it on anyone who'll listen.
What about those who don't?
They can go to hell.
I'm going to post in the IRC channel some of the websites that I have found helpful, to get started in Perl 6.
Perl6.org.
I closed my Google Hangout window and lost connection there. Good.
Right. I'm broadcasting. Whoops.
This first site that I posted is a blog series created by a fellow named Mike Friedman, who lives in and works in New York City, and let me see if I.
Whoop.
And to just take one of his blog posts in particular, this one about exploring Perl 6 hyperoperators. One of the things that you'll find is that Perl 6 has vastly more operators than Perl 5 does, and they can do some really cool things. And
I remember them all.
Pardon me?
They're all derivatives of one another, though.
Well, that may be the case. I don't know, but I mean, this. I can see why people are fascinated with this, because it enables you to do more concisely things that would take many more keystrokes in other languages.
I have the periodic table of Perl 6 operators on here.
Pretty cool. I think the biggest problem with the language is not being overwhelmed by it at the beginning. You have to start with a subset.
A lot of the operators, though, are about, adding a modifier at the beginning or end of an operator to do different things. So they're really just cases of the same operator.
But this diagram is 10 or 12 years ago, so I'm not sure.
It might be. It may be a little out.
It was when the Chicago YAPC was happening.
Oops, where do we go?
The problem with all the hyperoperators is that you need to document them all so that some new person coming along trying to maintain your code can figure out what the heck's happening.
I just posted a link to Perl6intro.com, which is a um, relatively up-to-date introduction to Perl 6. I've been working through the sections on operators and variables myself. And this website, doc.perl6.org, that's the official online documentation. And just looking at the page that I posted, you can see, you know, the wealth of operators and such.
I never saw, did they, one thing I remember at one YAPC, I think it was the second Chicago, Damien Conway did a talk about phasers. And I don't know if that ever made it into the final, if they've actually implemented all of them.
They have more than Perl 5.
Hmm?
They have more phasers than Perl 5.
Oh yeah, but I don't know if they implemented all of them. I seem to recall they were long in the list of things not implemented.
Well, at least some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Could be phased in.
I do actually occasionally use begin and end,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't imagine using those ones.
I think what caught me was the loop execution. You know, special case on first, and the next and the last. The phasers would, when you would use a for loop over the indices, when normally you would just do a for each, because you need to know first, if you are at the first or the last. The phasers get rid of that need to loop over the indices, and you just do loop over the values instead, and use the phaser to say, is this the last?
Or you don't need data. A flag.
A flag or some such thing, yeah. Did you send it to the right list?
I hope so.
I still have the old TPM list. Oh, yeah. No, I see it. I know the loop phasers seem silly, but it was one of those things, like, I always hated having to switch to the indices when really I just wanted the values and I just needed to know first and last.
Hey, can you post those links on the mailing list, or?
They'll be available in the YouTube video. Well, yes, I can post those.
Because without having a computer boot away on a Perl 6, go home instead.
Come on, Clay.
See you guys next month.
Already recruiting for April's talk. See if Mr. Hoyt will oblige.
Topic?
Pick one.
Actually, considering how my new job is going to go, I'm considering putting together something. I've seen stuff before, but putting a Ruby for Perl hackers kind of presentation. Because I'm going to be learning some stuff real soon.
Ruby? It's really shop.
Mm-hmm.
I have been farting around with Ruby for a while.
Oh, yeah?
Whether or not that translates to Ruby for Perl hackers, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I've ever been sufficiently twisted to really do Perl well. It just sort of...
I could do a presentation on Perl 561 and SCCS.
Yeah.
What? That's 6.1.
Yeah, my new job at CIBC.
SCCS, you're using it.
Well, no, they used SCCS when they switched to this machine in 2006.
Okay.
But when they changed staff, then the guy stopped using that and just used file name underscore new and file name underscore new dot old and file name underscore new dot rich.
Yeah, the thing with banks is you get a very, very varying quality of coworkers.
Like everywhere else. Some degree.
I feel like banks are special in that regard.
And when you say variance, you're meaning on the lower end of the scale?
Well, I work at a large bank. I work at RBC, and I mean, there's some very good people there. And there are some people who are like, what lies did you tell to get this job?
How do you keep this job?
Like I have had QA people who, like they actually I would have gotten it done. Like I could have basically. They actually cost me more time than it would have for me to just do their job. Like it came down to, I will write a script that runs all of the tests I've designed. You will then run this script, record that the result is correct, and sign off. Yay!
I will replace you with a very small shell script.
Well, it's a Java shop, so I will replace you with a 300-line Java program. But still, but most of those are generated, so that's okay. Java's, well, anyway, I have thoughts about Java.
Can any of them be spoken in public?
Well, we need something to fill up these new larger hard drives we have.
So Java is a really mediocre language, but it has a really good open source community, and it also has the enterprise software community, and it's the way these things combine is interesting. Like the guy who has a thing that needs to do one database query, so he uses Hibernate. So the program is 10,000 lines, but about 200 of those are machine generated, and there's no distinct, and the build process doesn't regenerate them or anything. There's no like, this is machine generated and garbage, this is code we care about. No, there's this massive code. And of course, at one point, just for giggles, because I was waiting for someone downstream to do something, and so at the time, I just, started stripping out the machine-generated code, got it down to 200 lines. It didn't work because something came up, but that's the thing. You have this stupidly complicated infrastructure that might arguably make sense if you're dealing with some massively, horribly complicated thing that will generate millions of lines of code, because another 10,000 generated lines of code or dot is not a big deal. But come on, like one query.
Well, how many hundreds of megabytes of jar files and how many jar files do you
Well, I don't care about that. I mean, the machine does that. But yes,
There's one positive thing I find about Java compared to Perl is CPAN, you get badly written modules put in obviously useful places. Because you don't have necessarily the path you would have for your imports in Java.
Oh yeah. Well, we use Python, which is just as fun. The nice thing about Java is the jar file has everything. So it's like you make this compact single file, you hand it to the JVM, it usually runs it as expected if it's a later version than the one you built against. Oracle is not too terrible about that. So, but I mean, yeah, you try to install it on the Perl that is maintained by some other department who is not responsible to you and doesn't really answer their emails and requires filling in a ticket on some horrific,
OTRS?
OTRS? No, it's a Hewlett-Packard product, SM9. Hewlett-Packard Service Manager, where it will be reviewed by several layers of management before it is approved to install a CPAN package. So you don't do that, you just download the CPAN package. Well, okay, we use Python, so you download the Python module and just drop the source code in with your other stuff so that, at least your source tree is mostly self-contained. And then, so people occasionally talk about how Python is, cleaner than Perl.
Don't get me started on it.
Oh, I have absolute proof that this is false. I've worked on absolutely terrible Perl code, and I've worked on absolutely terrible Python code now, and the Python code was better, but only because it was shorter. And even then, I can complain about pretty much any language.
Oh yeah.
It's true.
You You can write Java in any language.
You can write Fortran in it. You can write intercal in any language, and frequently they do.
I met the author of Inline Fortran, actually.
I did not know such a thing existed.
He was an intern here.
Oh, yes. Was that a joke? Like, was it written as a joke, or?
We made a joke out of it. We actually made a little comment about it. That'd be about as useful as Inline Fortran, and he didn't realize that we looked it up and knew that he wrote it. So we were just poking fun at him. He actually went on to. He was a very smart young man. He's been back a couple of times. I'm not sure what he's doing now. He went on to contribute to Parrot actually back in the day.
Oh, there we go.
There's still both link pack and similar.
What was
Yeah, no, there's legitimate uses for inline Fortran.
Somebody mentioned the fellow who was contributed to the Parrot project.
Sorry?
Somebody mentioned someone who contributed to the Parrot project.
Yes, Peter Lobsinger.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and for a couple of years there, he was a very strong contributor. And one of the last times that I actually did make it to Toronto, I emailed him about Toronto PM, and he came to a meeting. And I got to meet him in person.
Yeah, I remember.
2009, 2010, something like that.
A very smart young man.
Yes.
Jesus. Is it possible? Does anyone know of a download link for getting the Perl documentation in HTML as a tarball?
As a tarball? Yeah. I mean, there's the Git repo There's the Git repo that lets you build docs.6.
Which I'm a little bit. That seems like more work than I would like to do if I can avoid it. So, was just hoping.
I don't know if there's a tarball.
So they have Wi-Fi in the subway.
So, which docs do you want?
Oh, I'm just hoping for all of the Perl 6 docs. So the doc website, but in the tarball of HTML.
Well, that's it there if you want to compile it yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I can give it a try.
Is it written in Perl 6?
Well, it
is. Yay.
I do have Perl 6 running, so
rather convenient.
It's really nice to have just bandwidth here. Not used to that.
You're on the guest network?
Yep.
It has bandwidth?
Well, enough.
Oh, I was going to say, something changed.
I'm not trying to. Well, I'm only downloading megabytes, so it's not huge.
.7 sites to do the use inline Perl 5 and load a module and do it.
Just sort of link to the executable.
I guess it's linking and compiling something in the background, maybe? I don't know. But yeah, it takes 4 seconds, and that's on a pretty fast machine.
So was that for evoking with a bang line?
Yeah, it was just that Perl 6 use inline Perl 5 and then import a module, and it took 4.5 seconds. But we're sure they're working on it.
We just do the same thing, but get 2 of them.
I'm sure it'll be fast.
It'll be probably 4.51 seconds or something. It's all load in 50, or no, more, probably more like 100 live modules.
Using the interactive session just to load that library takes them around 4 seconds.
Yeah.
Really?
So inline Pro 5 is slow.
Pro 5 is not slow.
No, but inline Pro 5 in Pro 6 is slow.
Okay.
Just about everything in Perl 6
Yeah,
is
okay.
slow.
Well, the reality is, this is the first, implementation.
It's an
and-
alpha release.
Well, it's going to take time for things to speed up.
Well, and the thing too is the current C Python Ruby implementation it takes about 1.5 seconds to start up.
Are you using the JRuby or just the?
Just regular Ruby. I use both, but and both of them take a while. Actually, so at one point I was doing stuff in Ruby, and I was also doing stuff in a somewhat old C program. This one, 1,700 lines long, and I realized that startup Ruby about 1.5 seconds. Compile the entire C program from sources, about 1.5 seconds. So, I mean, it's simply the matter of everything is expected to work in a couple of seconds. So, but the computers get faster.
For an interpreter, the whole point is supposed to start instantly.
Well, yeah, but 1.5 seconds is close enough, and you spend a little bit of time on that to get the thing to run faster when it actually does, and trade-offs.
The problem is the interpreter then loads huge numbers of libraries.
Yeah.
One thing that never really worked in Perl was dump.
That would have been a handy thing to have.
Yeah, because it would say get to here, dump, which would create a core dump.
Right, and then you could just.
And then there was an undump program that would turn it into a binary, and then you could run the binary, and it would be starting off exactly where the dump.
Yeah, but I mean the whole thing is a hack, right?
Yeah,
It's not like.
and that's the problem with it.
I mean,
And it doesn't track all of the things that had to be done before.
There are a couple of efforts now, Perl and C Perl and something else,
Yeah.
to do things that are very fast. The Perl one, I think, forbids things like eval, so that it doesn't need an actual interpreter.
Oh, okay.
It forbids a lot more than that.
But that's the kind of thing, dynamic stuff. Unfortunately, you have to type all your variables.
Does anyone know if the so as we're running more VM now? I know there's some work to get it to work Perl 6 on JVM. Does anyone know any of the status of that? If that's working or?
It's not currently working.
It's not currently working.
No. If you dig a bit deeper into that Rakudo.org page, you'll see that they currently recommend only the more MOAR version of the, and it doesn't work on Parrot anymore either. About 2 years ago, I tried to compile it on the JVM, and the results were not satisfactory. So at the current time, everybody is really focused on Rakudo on the MOAR VM.
I'm just thinking, yeah, long term it would be cool if, cool, I don't know if cool's the right word, but you can then, call into Java code.
Tolerable.
Just like JRuby. There's definitely some, use in that.
Yeah, the ability to use Java libraries from an interpreted language is very handy. Especially if it's one of those that requires 18 stupid configuration parameters and work if you get one thing wrong. So, not that I have done that.
Wouldn't you just wind up importing the DLL held equivalent Java into?
No. You build a jar file, you throw all your dependencies in the jar file. You use Maven because it just resolves them for you. And then you just fire up JRuby and you say, import this jar file, and now all the libraries are there. And then you do, variable equals object dot factory dot meta factory dot constructor dot I feel like something else new, and you get your instance and then you poke at it until it works. It's a really handy thing.
I'm afraid I'm actually going to have to cut the meeting down. My wife just called me and said the basement's flooding.
Oh,
Well,
just change the sign at the top of the stairs to swimming pool.
Unfortunately, my computer is down there, all my stuff.
I hope you have backups.
You'd like that.
You do one now. Feverishly, RC, SSH in, RC, there we go.
So thank you very much, Jim. We really appreciate you keeping the date even though you couldn't make it here.
Yes, well, I look forward to the next in-person presentation. And, you know, as I posted there, like what we in New York have done to start a Perl 6 beginners group, which, you know, you may or may not want to do that in Toronto. But I would just say that everyone should try to figure out, you know, to what extent they're actually interested in Perl 6, and then to allocate a certain amount of time each week, and you know, and we'll see how things go. Also, I forwarded to the Toronto mailing list the latest newsletter from YAPC NA. I know that YAPC took a long time to get organized this year, but we're going back to Orlando, and the deadline for submissions is for conference submissions is March 1st. So if anybody's interested in making a submission, please do so right away. Okay, so I wish I could be joining you at the bar afterwards, but there's a little bit of 500 miles of distance.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim. Enjoy the virtual bar.
The virtual clan.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Alex, all my other old friends there. Hope to see you.
Okay. Thanks so much.
all right.